Welcome back. Republican nominee Donald Trump slamming the Democratic Party for failing to mention ISIS or the war on terror on day one of the DNC.
We need to change our foreign policy to focus on defeating and destroying ISIS, a word you didn't hear last night at the Democrat convention. You didn't hear it. They don't want to talk about it. Because in a very true way, they really established ISIS because of weakness.
Trump's remarks came early Tuesday morning, allowing Democratic speakers a chance to update their remarks before the Tuesday night speeches.
Democrats know we need to be strong and smart to destroy ISIS and protect America, not reckless and rash.
And this is the Hillary Clinton I support, the one who has been in the arena, who knows what it will take to keep America safe and defeat and destroy ISIS, and has demonstrated the leadership and determination we need in our next president.
Missing from that clip was former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who removed 2 references to ISIS from an earlier version of her speech that was released to the media. Let's bring in Major General Matthew C. Horner, Distinguished Chair of Military Theory at Marine Corps University and Defeating Jihad author, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Maria.
First, obviously, another tragedy in terms of ISIS in France, stabbing that priest. Your thoughts on that and where we are in this fight against ISIS?
Yes, it's horrific. You wake up, you turn on the news, you switch on your social media feeds, and what do we find? Day after day after day, an attack. A pregnant woman here, an IED at a music festival, a priest practically beheaded in front of the altar of a Catholic church in France. It's the jihadis are on a rampage. They're expanding in ways that we've never seen before, and it seems as if the left hasn't noticed it or only is prepared to mention it when a certain presidential candidate from New York reminds them that ISIS is out there and ISIS is growing in part because of the policies of the current administration, Maria.
So what about the policies and policies expected? As we move closer to the November election, which candidate has proposed the best policies? Can you talk about the best way to defeat ISIS and who would be best at it?
It's not easy, Maria, to talk about concrete policies from either Hillary Clinton or Mr. Trump. The only thing that we're sure of is that Hillary Clinton would really be at least, at best, a third term for Obama, because at the beginning of her campaign, she was very explicit. I'm not going to use the word radical Islam. I refuse to say anything about the religious component of the enemy that we face. So this is what we've heard for the last 7.5 years, the denial of the reality of who the enemy is. After Nice, she was painted into a corner, realized she was on trouble, desperately tried to get onto Fox News, and then started to talk about radical jihadism, as if there's a non-radical version of jihadism. So if you look at her track record, the disaster in Syria, the disaster of the deaths of our ambassador and three other Americans in Benghazi, the Russia reset, Libya, you name it, we know that it will not bode well for the future and probably make Americans more in danger than they are already. If you look at Mr. Trump, what do we know about him? He doesn't have a national security background. He has a team he's hired to advise him, hasn't given details on what he's going to do against the threat. But one thing he has made patently obvious, Maria, he has had enough of political correctness. That's going to be jettisoned if he's the commander-in-chief. And on top of that, it's very clear that for him, we are at war. This is a war to the death with the jihadis, and Donald Trump clearly wants to win that war. So I think that's what you can definitely say about those two candidates.
But Sebastian, it's Dagan McDowell. Does it bother you that we are not hearing more detail from him about how he's going to wage that war and fight that war, even when asked in that 60 Minutes interview about boots on the ground and putting troops there? He, quite frankly, dodged that question.
Yeah, it does bother me. As a person who eats, drinks, and sleeps national security issues, I want to hear a little bit more, because I know some of the people on his campaign staff. I mean, I advised Mr. Trump last year before anybody took him seriously on national security issues, but I'm not part of his team today. I'm not part of his national security coterie. And those people know what they're talking about, people like Waleed Faris. I want to see the words, the ideas of his best team members be championed by this presidential candidate. So, yeah, I'd really love to hear more.
Dr. Gorka, it's Julie Roginski. I know that you have obviously ties to Eastern Europe. Are you troubled at all by his whole distancing himself from NATO, essentially saying we're not going to come to the defense of our NATO allies necessarily, in his relationship or trying to have a relationship with Vladimir Putin, who I think you would agree is not necessarily the best actor with respect to American interests?
Yeah, we've got to watch the conspiracy theories here. My parents came from Hungary. They escaped a communist country. He didn't say we're not going to defend our NATO allies. I actually published an article at Breitbart.com on this. He said we will support our allies if they stand by their commitments that they have made, which is a really reasonable statement to make. If you're being a freeloader, why do I have to bail you out? So he said that we will stand by Estonia. We will stand by the Balts if they stay true to their word. And if you look at NATO behavior, you know, only 5 nations out of 28 are reaching the 2% GDP figure for their own defense. That's pathetic. For the last 20 years, the majority have taken our security, our provision of their security for granted. So, you know, Trump is applying some common sense, which may be scary for some, but it's about time.
Dr. Gorka, it's great to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.